Thank you so much, Janelle, for coming and joining us here today. Really excited to have you.
Thank
So,
you.
as I think about how I want the conversation to go and how we start engaging, I think it's important for us to explore origin stories. So, I'd love to hear a little bit about who is Janelle Young. We know about the work a little bit, but tell me who you are.
Sure. I think I have always been, a creator, a creative person, very colorful, bold, kind of loud visually, but to myself, as a person, I love to explore things and to learn new things. I'm super curious as a person. So for me, that manifests in ways that look like travel, that look like solo trips, that look like, going to different countries. It also looks like exploring different, media in my work, working with different types of people. And I like to say I'm a big fan of unconventional collaboration. So I'm
Okay.
always just trying to see like a creative way through something. Um, I had an interview a while back where the journalist who I was speaking with, he described me as artist meets athlete. And I was like, that's it. That's the one.
Okay.
I'm going with that forever.
All right. Artist
um,
meets athlete. I
yeah,
like
just
it.
an active person in general. So I like to be outside. I like to use my hands. I like to do things.
Okay. And I can believe it. I see the basketball hoop right behind us. I can believe it.
To no fault
Uh,
of mine, that is there.
hey, it is that's a layer of authenticity. I can see it right there. So we understand a bit about who you are. Where are you from?
I am originally from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Born and raised there. I went to school there all the way through high school. And then I stayed in state for college. So I went to Penn State. Also, almost against my will, not quite, but like very close. As somebody who likes to explore, right? I was like, let's get out of
Mhm.
Pennsylvania. But yeah, that's where I'm from. But I've lived in so many other places since then. So yeah.
So I asked this in very much the truest sense, and you can answer however you want to answer. But in some places in spaces, there's where we are from, but then our families and what we connect to as more of a deeper home is someplace else. So you're from Pittsburgh. You go Pennsylvania strong, or at least you did for a period of time until you started exploring. But where are your people from?
Yes. So both my parents are actually from Pittsburgh,
Okay.
which is kind of awesome to have that like so strongly rooted there. But further back than that, my family is from the South. My family's from Georgia. I've got family all over. I've got family in the Midwest. But it's interesting because when people, they ask me where I'm from or where I live, and sometimes I just kind of have this response of like, I'm a child of the world. Like all the experiences kind of come together. And I've kind of had the privilege to travel based on like where my parents lived as well. My dad lives in Atlanta now. So that's where I currently am hanging out with the fam. Um, Previously, he lived in Illinois. Before that, he lived in Dallas, Texas. So, I'm no stranger to hopping on a plane for family.
That's awesome. So maybe
Yeah.
we need to add another A there. So you have artist meets athlete meets adventurer. There
Yes.
we go.
That's it.
Those are three. That's
That's
it.
the A's right there.
So when we think about the journey from here to there, so deep in Pittsburgh, family all over, unique childhood growing up in Pittsburgh, given some of those roots.
Mhm.
So what's the journey from there to here? Was there a phase or a stage of your life that was really, really influential? Were there any people who were instrumental to who you are today?
Yes and yes. The people part, we could have 3 more podcast episodes. But the easy kind of answer to that, the short answer to that is definitely my like middle school years
Hmm.
shaped my journey now. I don't think I specifically knew it at that very point in time, but sixth through eighth grade specifically, I went to a school in Pittsburgh called Rogers Kappa, which is creative and performing arts. It is now combined with the creative and performing arts high school. It was not that way when I went there.
Hmm.
Um, but I had to audition to get in. I had to have a portfolio.
What was in that portfolio?
Oh, all the sketches that I would do, like characters that I created and designed from my imagination, a bunch of still life, which if people are not familiar, that's just literally if like when you take an object, like let's say it's a water bottle and you put it on the table and that's your study. You draw that to the best of your ability. That's just a way to practice. So yeah, I did a lot of sketches, and my mom was one of those people who kept everything, and it
Oh.
worked out in my to my advantage. um, because we were able to, yeah, like put all that stuff in my portfolio. But it's funny because part of that journey was watching like my parents be fascinated by what I could do. So like a lot of the still lifes were just because like my mom would get excited and be like, "You could draw that? Okay, now try this. Draw a shoe. Now try this. Draw, a mug." Like it was fun for them too.
Well,
um
see, and that's interesting though, because did you what did you at that age, fifth to eighth grade, Janelle, what did you think you wanted to be when you grew up?
we have found evidence. It was very clear I wanted to be an artist.
Okay, okay, so we started there,
We started there. I had no clue what that looked like professionally at all.
but
So
that's what you.
I was trying to find for many years after that, right, from ninth grade on, I was trying to figure out how to wrap my head around a profession that might include art or creativity, but maybe my title wasn't artist.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're sketching, you want to be an artist. You've
Mhm.
now gone into this middle school that's focused on that. How did that change you and help shape you at that period in time?
First of all, it taught me everything, like from color theory to figure drawing to painting, ceramics. Like, so we almost did like rotations where you could try everything and see kind of where you fit in. Um, Prior to that, I really wasn't a painter, but it's funny because now that I think about it, whew, technology has come such a long way. One of the first assignments that I did in one of my art classes, it was about color theory, but I did it on the computer
Hmm.
where like, let's say the color was red, and I had to prove that I understood the difference between tints and shades, which is
Hmm.
basically adding white to a color or adding black to a color. And I did it like probably in paint or something.
Yeah.
but I
Everybody used paint. It was
but
like, was it big watch or little watch? Which one? But we were all over the page.
But I made this cool little like outline and I like of blocks, and I filled the blocks with the different tints and the different shades and the red in the middle to separate everything. And I think that that assignment is actually what prompted my art teacher at that time, Miss Costanza, to like hone in on what my skills really might be. And she actually selected me the next year to be part of a mural painting team.
That is excellent.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm seeing the building in the building, and I'm gonna ask you one more question, two more actually, but then we're gonna do the curveball of things, right? Because you're now surprised to me saying you were born to be an artist. You knew you wanted to be an artist. You went to school, middle school, and you're doing all this work, and then somehow you ended up being a communicator. So we're gonna get to that, but I want to understand this, and I think I probably know the answer now that I'm hearing this. What gives you energy?
um, yeah, travel. Like there is a beautiful energy that comes with just like touching down in certain cities. Like even, I lived in New York and like even when I go back there, it's like as soon as those wheels from a plane hit the ground, I feel something different and I'm like, "Oh, we are here to do something, like make something shake." I feel like
Yes.
that about a few different cities. So that definitely gives me energy. Color gives me energy. Um, and just, yeah, like doing purposeful work is so helpful. And
Yes.
a lot of times in my work, um, or somehow adjacent to it, there might be like youth or kids involved. And that also gives me energy and like a new kind of like refreshed sense of like what I'm doing.
Okay. You can see my need to go for the alliteration. So we have color, we have kids, we have cities. All right, cities. So I'm almost there, but I can agree with you on that one. So I have two kids, and they both give and taketh away in energy. The cities piece is real. So I'm from New York, born and raised. I went to DC, and I kind of have this like back and forth relationship. Every few years, I feel the need to be in the other place,
Hmm.
but there's something about New York City that you kind of plug into. And it's a charging place for me where it can be a draining place for a lot of other people.
Yes.
And it's you got to figure out the rhythms a little bit. And I didn't quite understand it until I started to go be other places. I jokingly said my first PR job was convincing my mother that I should go to boarding school in a place neither of us had been. And I was 13, and here I am. I'm like, oh, I went on the school trip, and now I want to go to this high school. And she was like, wait, you want to go where? With who? And I said, yeah, this school in New Hampshire. Don't worry about the tuition. We'll figure that out when we figure that out. And thankfully, it was figured out with a scholarship. But when I went there, I was now in the wilderness, living on a lake. You could see mountains. It was so different from Brooklyn and Queens, what I was used to. But coming home, we would take the train, we would take Amtrak, and there's this point where you kind of like crossing through the Bronx, and you get like the first shot of like the skyscrapers. You get the first shot of the city. And also the other thing that we would get is that once you get a certain ways outside the city, you lose like Hot 97 and all the stuff. So this is back then. I'm kind of dating myself a little bit. It was like, okay, that was the radio station. We didn't have iPhones and everything like that. But you got that first like, all right, the static is gone and I can hear Hot 97. Like I'm here. And then by the time you get on the platform, you feel the energy. People are moving, they are doing things, and you're like, all right, now I'm in the shuffle. Now I'm doing it too. And so I can hear you on that where it's like, all right, there's certain places where I just feel good upon arrival. And I
Yeah.
feel what the energy and the urgency or the calmness of that place is.
Hmm.
And so on that calmness piece, I want to go to where do you most find peace?
In my home.
That's a good place. That is a
Like,
good place.
I am a homebody by default. Um, but I also realized over time that like my quiet place, I have two very specific quiet places. One is a direct like I can give you the Google Maps. I'm not going to because then you
Okay.
can't
Hey,
go
that's
there.
fair.
That's my
You must
spot.
protect your peace. You got to protect your peace.
Yeah, that's my spot. But specifically in Pittsburgh, um, I grew up pretty close to what we call Mount Washington, which is the overlook of the city. Um, it's quite beautiful. I didn't realize before I left how unique that city really is as far as its structure and everything. And like,
Mhm.
if you've never been there, we have three rivers. We are the city of bridges. So you just see like all the bridges, you see the water, and then you see like downtown and the stadiums and everything that Pittsburgh is known for, like sitting right on top of that. And it's so beautiful. Um, Later, I realized like when I lived in New York, when I needed to feel calm, it clicked like I need to be by water. So I
Hmm.
would go wherever, like, I gotta go to the Hudson. I gotta make my way over there. But I realized that being by water is very calming. So that's worked out in every city so far. Um, Pittsburgh, New York, Chicago, everybody has a river for me. So that's great.
Good.
But then also, I realized much later that actually, like, being on a lift, like really high in the air, is like my quiet place.
Mm.
Because one, a lot of people don't want to come up there with you. And two, it's like you can actually just feel everything in your body. You can assess everything, including like your fears and, what you're there to accomplish. And it is just a great place for me to just like sort out things in my mind with a paintbrush in my hand.
Okay, excellent, excellent. So, thank you for taking us on that journey and that origin story piece to understand a little bit more about who you are, what gives you energy, what gives you peace, and what some of those phases and stages were that really shaped you. So, we're here to talk about rest, specifically the practicality of rest. And this came up in one of our earlier conversations, and I want to, before we really get into it, I want to share a video and I want to get your reaction to it because as I was prepping and thinking through, what do we want to talk about? This is something that I wanted to share with you. And all right, so I want to show you Monique Shields, and I happen to just be scrolling through reels, and of course, the internet speaks to you when you start looking for things. It gives you a few things back.
Look, I'm nobody's sociologist, but it is abundantly clear to me that we are experiencing a delayed onset mass collective burnout from 2020. I think that we spent 2 years trying to survive what was mayhem, and then when we were finally allowed to go outside again, we ran as fast as we could to be anywhere and everywhere that we could be for a whole solid year. And then we spent last year trying to account for everything that happened and realized we had very little left that they were actually running on E and that were depleted. And this year, we don't know what to do with ourselves besides find a cozy place to nap. Everybody is looking to retreat, myself included. Everyone is looking for respite. It is, there's something collective going on here. I know I'm not alone in seeing this. Am I alone? I'm not alone. There's no way I'm alone because I keep hearing about it. This is my line of work. I spend my days talking to people for a living. This is what I do. And perhaps it's just in my set of communities and in my network, but we are worn down. And I think the one note I want to make on this is just to stop asking yourself, prove that you deserve the break. It may not make sense, but it's what's happening. Look, I'm nobody's sociologist.
So, given our focus on the practicality of rest, I would love to get your reactions to that perspective from Monique.
First of all, snaps to Monique. Yes, absolutely. Clearly, a lot of people agree with her. 100,000 people, in fact, and
Hmm.
plus one. Um, my reaction is yes, I have felt very similarly. Maybe even a bit before now, and maybe even a little bit before 2020.
Mm.
But the thing is, we collectively are programmed to think that we have to prove that we need rest, or we have to, you know, we have to earn it.
Hmm.
And it took me a really long time to unlearn that as someone who is like an overachiever and a go getter and is super ambitious and then decided to be an entrepreneur. Yeah, that's hard. It's a hard thing to like really look it in the eye and
It is.
realize what it is.
It
Um,
is. And I'm so glad that you're being open with that and say, okay, because it is easy to look at the biggest, craziest thing we've collectively shared, the pandemic, and say, okay, that was the cause of the thing. And she very clearly kind of went through the phases of it, which I think not everybody has spent enough time to contextualize. Like there are shapes of this,
mhm.
but also your acknowledgement that there was a period before this in the ways that we were operating that led us to think during the pandemic, well, we might be able to do the same thing, just ratchet down a little bit because we were, some of us were already, running on E when that thing showed up.
That's
And there's a shape and a place to this. And so you were one of the first people that I spoke to when I was thinking about bringing back one quick point. And it was December, in fact. And I was so proud of myself at that point in time for getting towards the end of the year and just managing my energy well.
mhm.
Because she's talking about, okay, well, we went through the pandemic and then we were just out here the next year just trying to do all the things because we could. And I think, I don't know if I was doing all the things, but I had started to do more. And I wasn't really ready for that. So 2022 ended and I was just barely like, I could, it was a day by day, and not even a week by week of like, let's just keep chugging. Let's just find a way. And you get to the new year and you're just like, all right, this is all I got. And I felt drained and somehow was still trying to push me that whole like, yeah, let's get it for January 1 on 2023, like I had rested at all. Like the stroke of midnight is just gonna like, all right, now you recharge and you re-up and you're good. And it's not. And so I tried to approach 2023 differently, better. So I will say that it was better. That was the hardest year I've ever had professionally, but it ended in a clear-eyed way for me where I was able to see and pay attention to past patterns, right? So I
Right.
was like, all right, that's what happened last year. We're not going to do that this year. And so at minimum, what we're going to do is prioritize maintaining this energy. We are
Right.
not going to end the year on E. And so however the work falls, it will do well because, we are who we are, so we're not going to drop the ball, but we're going to prioritize getting to the end of the year in a better place. And so for me, Q4 was so much about acceptance and managing that energy. I portioned out the time. But what I realized in some of our conversations is that none of this was really about rest and certainly wasn't about making anything practical. It was just like, let me just get there better than I did last time. And so I want to dig into it a little bit because you made a shift from the world you were in into the current world you have now, and I want to start with understanding what your relationship with rest is, part one. And part two is, did you know what that relationship was when you were in the agency grind?
Okay.
Yeah, so that's a lot there.
So I would just like to start by saying I've had multiple conversations like with close friends where we have acknowledged like, you know, people, and when I say people, I mean institutions, I mean whoever, they seem to have come out of the pandemic, out of, in quotes,
Hmm.
out of the pandemic, thinking that we're going to be just as productive as we were before we went in. And I'm here to tell you, it's not happening. Not for me. It's just, it's not a thing. Um, I think more than anything, it just put in my face like the tolerance level that I have for depleting my own energy. Cause like there's a point where I think a lot of us we do it willingly. right?
Yes.
We think we're supposed to, and it's not really how it's supposed to work. My relationship with rest has always been a great one. My parents will be the first to tell you, like when I was like really young, like that age where kids like don't want to go to bed and they don't want to take naps and all that. Like I've heard the stories that like we'd have a house full of people and my mom would be like, "Well, I need to go find Janelle. Where's Janelle?" And I would already put my own pajamas on and I already got in the bed. I'm tired. I'm going to bed. That's it. That's all.
That's funny. No, that is funny. I'm smiling because I had a cousin who loved sleep, love sleep.
I love sleep.
And to the point, we'd go to my aunt's house and I'd say, where is she? And because everybody knows this up, her response was doing what she does best. That's what she would say. And it's understood. Once you hear that, oh, she's sleep and good sleep for, a few hours. So, go
I
ahead and entertain yourself.
I love naps. I love sleep. I love sleeping in. I'll get it however I have to get it. But with the flip side of that coin being when the switch is on, it's on, right? Um,
Okay.
so I spent a lot of my life trying to like manage whatever that is. um, so back to the question, the second part of that, yeah, when I was working in the agency life, I did not have a good relationship with rest. It wasn't because I didn't want to. I just thought I wasn't supposed to do it or that the way that I did it had to look a certain way. Like sure, I'll take my nap on the weekends or whatever, but like I'm working 14-hour days with an hour commute each way.
There is a
So,
thing. There's a thing with that. Some of it is expectations because I've had some challenging bosses, and that even was an edit. Some of them were legitimately crazy the way they operated, and they would put this stress and ownership and expectation on you at very junior levels,
yes.
that made you respond that way. But then the other side of it is at a certain point, and when I say agency, for those who don't know my professional background, it's PR agency, and so there's just a churn with like we're doing the work, we're serving, we're the outputs are endless, and
Yeah.
so there's a part of this where I remember my very first job, we had this kind of like first unspoken and then halfway spoken rule amongst the junior staff, like the first year employees, we were trying to somehow compete on not only who was going to work the most and be the most billable, but who was spending the most time in the office. Because it was just like you would see people coming and this was atypical. So I was in DC because the New Yorkers probably looking at me like I'm crazy. When I tell you, I used to be at my desk at 8 o'clock. I live like 40 minutes away. So I was at my desk at 8 o'clock and people are there already. And then I was
Mhm.
like, whoa, am I behind the eight ball? And you're trying to keep up and show your productivity in this way. So I started coming at 7:30 and then they started coming earlier. Now, mind you, we still have the long lead, so you're at 7:30, 8 o'clock at night. You are still at your desk. Then
Correct.
so it's like, wait, so are we not only working 12, 14 hours, but we are sitting here doing this too? Then you start to. There were many times it's like, well, so what are we paying for it with rent because we don't really spend time there, and it's almost like night and day when you think about how we used to have this relationship with work and rest then versus what it is now. But it good, at least in my mind, good to know at some level, okay, there was a shift because the environment is almost the culture of it is almost set up for output.
Oh,
It's not set
it's
up for
most
rest.
definitely that, and I can recall even a little after, I worked my way up from junior level, so I was in the agency world for 5 years. I worked myself up from essentially a glorified intern to the, like, senior level, as far as, serving, like, my SVP,
Mhm.
and, I recall more than once being called on vacation, being called past 11 p.m. because maybe the team is on the West Coast.
Wow.
Like
Wow.
I recall, times like that where I would be, if I was to categorize it now, I think I was angry. I think I was nervous. I was anxious like all the time.
Yeah.
Um yeah, it was a lot of that expectations. And then don't throw like other things into the mix like, "Oh, like you don't have kids? Oh, you don't, you're single? Oh, you don't like they're just, "Oh, yeah, you can do that. You can handle that. You don't need a weekend. You don't need vacation." Like that is a cultural thing. And I remember I just had to come to terms with it myself. Like there was a specific day that I like had a panic attack on the train, like on my way to work. I was like crying on my way to the office. And when I got there, I went straight to the bathroom. I wiped my face and I went to my desk and I worked a 14-hour day.
Wow.
you
It
know?
is what we do. It's like, all right, get yourself together because we still got to do this stuff.
Yeah, like I was like, okay, we get 5 minutes, we get it together. And then, I think it became, there was this mentality from, I am a millennial. So I think the generation above us really gave us this like, never let them see you sweat, never let them know that you're on the ropes, never. And I was like, somebody needs to know. I'm overwhelmed.
Yes, there's
So,
got to be some level of an outlet somewhere.
yeah,
And I remember, all right, so the whole like, oh, we're gonna race to the desk thing. That was my first role. I get to mid-level territory, similar to what you're saying, and I remember I had this supervisor who was on an exchange program. So in this role, like I had gone to China, I'd gone to other places and worked there. Well, this supervisor was in, I want to say she was in Dubai.
hmm
And we were working on a healthcare client, a pharma client, and they had this big release that was going to happen. And I remember the release vendor they chose, I kept warning them. I said, there's no way to test what this looks like. And you will know from those days, the way the release is laid out and the materials in the release is very important, only to us, but very important. And I kept warning them. I said, look, this vendor is not the right one. They're not going to let us see it. We can't verify that everything's going to work. And it was one of those, pharma clients, big details, legal reviews, all this stuff. So when I tell you, I think I gave myself a little bit of a reprieve of like, all right, I'm not coming to the desk at 7:30. But I bring up that the supervisor was in Dubai because I would go to work and she would be closing up for the night. But
right,
then I'd still be on my desk when she's waking up the next morning.
right.
And I remember very clearly that there was a project lead who sat in New York and she would leave the office. I'm in DC working on stuff and she'd go home and she got to walk her dog and she got to do whatever. And then she'd get back online
hmm
asking about, oh, well, what happened, from 5, 6 o'clock? Like, did you do those things now that you're at home on your couch back online? And I remember telling her at a point of frustration, because you're going to break, I said, I have to go home. And she says, well, how are we going to finish X, Y, and Z? And I said, well, it's going to have to be tomorrow unless you're going to expense my taxi. And I said, I live quite far, so it's going to be expensive. Because for those who are not familiar, like the DC area is not New York. The subway don't go everywhere. They call it the metro and it shuts down. And so this was a conversation we were having at 11 p.m.
Right.
with me telling this woman, I need to go home. And the last train leaves at 11:29. If I'm not on that platform, you need to expense, which is probably going to be like a $70 taxi home. And otherwise, we're going to figure this out. So I did what I had to do. I got on the train. I went home. And I had one of those, we're just going to give it to God moments because there's nothing else I could do in the morning. I've done everything. The release goes live. What's happened? What's wrong with the release? The link is broken. Somebody put an extra space in the link. And so this big
PR
announcement,
nightmare.
Nightmare. And now I'm like, look, there's nothing else I can do. So I didn't get to work at 8 o'clock. I got to work at 8:30. And as the train is about to go into the tunnel, BlackBerry, another dated moment, BlackBerry starts buzzing. I see the red light. My heart starts going. What's going on? Why is it buzzing so much? And it's too late. There's no more stops. I can't get off the train. And I'm just sitting there like, all right. So I come out the other side in DC. I get off the train before my stop. And I'm like, what is happening? Link is broken. This. There's like a full triage trying to figure it out. By the time I get to the office, I figured out what's going on. But that SVP is now like throwing me all the way under the bus. Oh, well, he didn't. Da, 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 da. This is what we do to ourselves. And to a certain extent, this is why some people don't make it through the agency grind, because it's too much and they need to find a way out. Or sometimes they realize, is this worth it? And they question what that is. And so they can handle it, but it's a choice of like, well, should I? What is it giving me? Is there something else? And
But
so
then
this brings me to the
you're
next.
proving it to yourself.
It's right here. And so I know a few people who've left agency life. They made a hard pivot. They went into a different space. The first one I realized was at that same company I was talking about. The head of legal, she left and started a landscaping business. Never looked back. Loved it, and was just, hey, this is what I do now. And so I want to say, what prompted your transition to be a full-time creative? And I heard that, okay, that was your origin. That was who you are. But what prompted it at that time?
Um, what prompted it at that time was burnout.
Hmm.
Complete, utter burnout. I was burnt out and I was anxious. And I knew that I was good at my job. Um, I led the innovation team. I was a senior digital content strategist. I, was putting my marketing degree to use since I didn't go to art school in the way that people would think I went, right?
Hmm.
Um I was making the money and I looked up one day and I was like, do I want my boss's job? Like, I'm next in line. Do I want his job? No. Okay. I had to sit with that. Then there was also this point of I need people to understand this. I stayed for a whole year after I knew like I didn't want to be there because I was wrestling with all these things. So people are like, "Oh, you're so brave," and I'm like, I mean, I guess, but
Yes, you are brave.
but
You
it took me a
you have
long
to fight
time.
with yourself.
I
You have to
did.
fight
I
with yourself.
really did, and I remember that people at the agency, they knew that I was creative beyond the work that I was doing in the office.
Hmm.
They knew I was an artist. They enjoyed, my big creative ideas for pitches. Um, they loved that I could be the liaison between like an account person and a graphic designer because I had the language.
Hmm.
Um, but they would not let me be creative in my own right. And so when I got to that point, I tried to find some workarounds. I really did. And I was like, okay, we have offices in other countries. Like, send me, can I do an exchange somewhere? Can I go work in Asia? Can I go do this? I studied abroad in Japan. So I was just like trying to think of all the possibilities. Like, how could we make this, work? I also asked if perhaps I could transfer and be part of the in-house design team. They said no. I said, okay, well, I gotta go. I'm
Yeah.
tired. So When I made the decision, it really was like I just need my creative juices back. I need to almost build back like my creative confidence. I felt like I
Hmm.
was at a point where I was pushing out big idea after big idea after big idea, and they were getting watered down. And as you know, that happens a lot in healthcare and with pharma, right? Because of the red tape and the legalese, and that's okay. But it was like it was happening over and over and over, and I was like, this doesn't feel like I'm making what I'm supposed to be making. So when I left the agency life, I mean, and honestly, I was looking to go to a different agency at that point. I was like, maybe if I just try different clients, maybe if I'm not in the healthcare industry, it'll be better. But I found that even recruiters were trying to pigeonhole me. And like I said, like 5 years can be a long time or it can be a short time.
Right. It's all in the perspective.
It is. And the recruiters were very much pushing me to stay in this industry because that's where the money is. And you've already been doing this for 5 years. And I'm like, yeah, I've been doing it for 5 years, but I'm like 26. You know what I'm saying? Like I was like 26,
Yes, but
27. Like that's what I'm saying. It's like I have so much more ahead of me. Why are you trying to pigeonhole me into this one industry? So I was getting really frustrated by that. And I said, I think I just need to walk away and then I'll figure it out. And that's what I did. So when I left, I didn't really have a plan as far as moving forward. I had a plan to live, um, within my means without a job, but I didn't have a plan on what the next job was going to be. And so what really happened is I just started doing things that made me happy. I started
what a novel concept, right?
volunteering. Crazy. I was volunteering. I ended up volunteering specifically at a mural festival where like I was just basically helping people paint like color by number. Like it wasn't my design or anything like that. Like I just went to help people paint inside the lines.
Mhm, mhm.
And I ended up getting connected with that organization to work with them more. And then they ended up hiring me. And then I was like, I'm a mural assistant in New York.
Look at that.
That's cool. And then when I realized, like, that if it's organized correctly and it's structured correctly, that I could make a living like this, I started to really consider it. Um, and so that's what happened. And my little, what I thought was going to be maybe a, 3 month break or something like that before I, start applying to real jobs
Yes,
again.
yes.
That turned into, oh, I'm working on a 9 month project painting. So I stayed in New York a whole year just being an artist. Yeah.
Can we pause on that though? Because that journey is why people are saying you're brave. You had to sit with it. You had to fight with yourself and wrestle with, like, okay, I am going to do something with this. Then you just said, okay, I don't know what the next thing is, but I know I'm leaving here. And then you're like, all right, I'm just going to focus on what makes me happy, and it will be figured out. I'll take the next few steps. And so the journey starts and things fall into place. And it's not easy, it never is easy. It doesn't feel good in the moment, but it feels good when you're doing the thing that you're
Hmm.
supposed to do. And when I think about so much of what I share with people about agency life and in careers and just life in general, I sometimes go back to it, and my wife laughs at me because she says I have my statements. But one of my statements is everybody just wants what they want. And they're playing for their own team. They're trying to get what they need. They want what they want. And there's a moment in time, the sooner you figure it out, the better. You got to figure out what you want. And you're making a determination about whether or not you're going to give them that thing and how aligned the thing they want is with the thing that you want. Because otherwise, you just end up in an area, especially in a career of client service, you end up serving and serving and serving. And then you got to turn around and say, okay, am I serving myself?
Yeah.
Am I serving myself with how I use my skills? Am I serving myself with what I'm producing? And if that matters, because other people have goals that, that's not important. It's just like, all right, I'm trying to get to a certain place, trying to, get this many bags. I'm trying to do. There's people who have different plans. But if you are a person who is living and feeling the work, there's other things that you want out of it. And so I applaud you for figuring out at the time that you did, 5 years in, oh my God, you can't do anything else, that you can do something else, and that it can be something that is going to sustain you.
Yeah.
But in that period when you were just figuring it out, okay, you spent a year being an artist. What did rest look like then?
It's interesting because, like, I almost don't remember,
Mm, okay.
but I think maybe that's a good thing. Like, I remember there being times where I was like, I'm restless, right? Like, I feel like I should be doing something, but I don't have anything to do. So then I'd have to like make up a project to do. And I'd be like, well, okay, sure. But I was very conscious of, like, I didn't want to sleep too much. I didn't want to like rot in bed. I didn't want, like, I would plan, I would have like more structured rest on like a
Hmm.
weekly basis, but it was like the things that brought me energy were also the things that were calming me down, which was also like, it, I think is a good thing because everything was so intertwined.
That's
It
a
was
beautiful thing, though.
it was
That
very smooth. It was very um like, I really felt for the first time in a long time that I really had the authority over like the balance of my life. And I remember, I don't want to go too much on a tangent, but I do remember having the feeling of like, yeah, I'm not making all that money, right?
Mhm.
Don't get it twisted. I was not going to miss a meal. My parents would they wasn't having that.
Right.
But I remember being like, but what did I need all that money for? I needed it to go on vacation and to get away and to not be stressed. And now that I actually just can exist here and not be stressed and not
Right.
have all those expectations on me, I was like, I actually feel pretty good. I don't even really need vacation. Like, I can do a staycation and I'm like having a great time. Like, I would plan little inspiration days and go to different museums and stuff like that. Like,
That's the adventure in you. It's there. You
yeah,
were able to bring it down to a level where you felt good, and that part started to come back out.
yeah, yeah, that's exactly right. So it was like, oh, like I have time to do the things that I care about or the things that will replenish me. And that was, when it kind of clicked for me that
And
it was
so
different.
with that, that is an interesting one, because what I'm hearing is, okay, I made this shift, and in this shift I became rested. And so now I have the time and the brain space and the headspace to think and feel in a new way that's kind of feeding you.
Mhm.
But, fast forward a few years, you're successful, you're doing it, you have multiple projects. So how did you make it realistic for you in practice? Like, how did rest become practical for you with all the work in the projects? Because it's not like you're not busy. I see Instagram, you're busy.
Yes. Yeah, to know me is to know I have a busy season, okay? So they're like, if I'm gonna get in there with you now, it needs to be between. Okay. Um Man, I think my, my stance on how to make it practical, how to make rest practical has definitely evolved as my profession has. So like I've been doing murals full time for 7 years, and that sounds crazy. But
Mm-hmm.
um I at first it was like still in that sense of like reward based, right? It's you plan a project, you do the project's done, you go on vacation. And then you come back and then that's the pattern, right? But then it was like, okay, well, what is it like now? I'm at the point where I'm like, well, what if I plan the vacations first and then I plan the work around my
See?
travels? Hmm. Well, how about if I apply to things that are in places I already want to be? Hmm. What does that look like? It's kind of mixing work and play a little bit, and then there's like the real like task management that has to happen. Like, am I putting on my out of office? If I am I actually not going to answer my emails?
Right.
Okay, now I need to hold to that. Whatever that boundary is, let me stick with it. Um, I use Calendly for my calendar. I'll
So
block
there are
off a whole
moments of
day.
structure.
I'm like, I'll block off a whole day just to say I'm not available, or um, if I went through a whole period where I was like, I don't want meetings on Fridays ever, or I don't want meetings on Mondays ever, and I stick to that as best as I can.
Now, this part is always interesting to me because to me, I think this is why I and so many people have also kind of focused on the shift of the traditional work setting in an office and how it worked. And to a certain extent, I'm sure the same is true for you because a lot of the people you're working with are not operating as you operate and they're
Mhm.
not producing what you produce. But the idea of like, oh, we're just not going to do meetings on specific days was like, what are you talking about? To your point, you're getting calls on nights and weekends, and we got to figure all this stuff out, and blah, blah, blah. I mean, even now with some pitches, I mean, I think it's a bit relaxed now, but I still remember working in New York at another agency where I'm going home at 10 o'clock, and the healthcare team, notice the trend, the healthcare team is getting, they're ordering dinner at 10 o'clock. And so they saw me in the home and they're like, "Oh, do you want to get in? We're going to order dinner." And I'm like, "No, I'm good. I'm going home." And they're parking it because they got a pitch. And so we all know we're just camping out here. And I think the shift happens when, even with the pandemic starting, I remember the team lead that I had at the time. We were doing our one on one. We were being cool. We were doing a walking one on one, and uh, I asked her. I was like, "Look, I keep hearing people say that we're gonna close. Do you think that's really gonna happen?" Because at the time, I can't contextualize that they're gonna shut the offices down and we're gonna work from home for real. And she's like, "Yeah, we're for sure gonna close." I said, "Well, for like how long? For like a week or two?" And she's like, "Yeah, that's probably right. That's probably right." And I laugh so much when I think about that because that's about as far as I would allow myself to think about how it would be. And then, all right, now we're like, for sure, two and a half, three, depending upon how you count your phases and what type of jobs you have of in this world. And now everybody's like, yeah, we're never quite going back to the way it was. It's just different now. But during that pandemic time, we did have the no meeting Fridays that some respected more than others, and then other people kind of tried to keep. And I think it has served a good because I think it has pushed people to think about how they did the work. How do you start to move through the space? How does it best for your brain to contextualize it? Because everybody's brain was stretched, regardless of your life commitments or what have you. We're in a place where literally we're not all okay. So we need to do what we can to do the work and be productive, but at the same time, take care of ourselves.
Yeah.
And that piece about, okay, I have structure, I use Calendly, these are the days that I don't do meetings, and I can still get everything done. Everybody still is going to get what they need in order for us to collectively move forward. I have a question though, because I heard this and we talked about it a little bit, but while you have days you don't do meetings, you also have months that you don't do work. How, how does that work? How does that fit in?
Ah. So here's the thing. I remember the first holiday season, like Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's, whatever.
Hmm.
after I had quit my job. And I was like, remember how stressed I used to be? Trying to figure out how I was going to work from home for these 2 days and maybe be in the office for this day and then like have to take vacation in between and trying to figure out how it was all going to fit. And I remember just like being so happy that I could just relax with my family. And that is when I was like, I gotta figure this out. How do we make this part sustainable? How do we prioritize this part? Um, so what I ended up doing
Hmm.
was partially it was that, and partially it was the nature of my work. My work is typically outdoors. With the weather is not weathering how I need it to weather, I'm not doing it out there. And so in
Hmm.
the places that I typically have lived, Pittsburgh, New York, Chicago, wintertime, I'm not going to be outside. So I think naturally there became like a very clear divide and shift between like, okay, this is when I get most of my requests to do work. They
Hmm.
fall before October. And then anything past that, the November, December, and then even into January, I'm not getting so many requests. And I remember thinking about that as a good thing and not like, oh, I need to fill that time with something else to do. Like, I was just like, maybe we could take advantage of this. So it was a little bit of both of those things. So, yeah, I don't work December and January. So, the end of the year and the beginning of the year, I say don't work, but I am severely less accessible to the outside world at that time. I'm very much still doing work that is planning, that is putting proposals together, that is applying to residencies. Like I'm doing those things, but they're so behind the scenes and I can do them as a one woman show most of the time, me and my laptop, right? Um, but I remember like I think I did that for it was like 2 or 3 years in a row. And I was like, I think I need to protect this. Like as
You
it
are
is.
you are
I need to
hitting
protect.
you are hitting all the key moments, right? Because I even navigate some of this with some of the people I work with now, where if you're in a culture of production and billable hours or whatever the thing is that you're meant to output, the minute you don't have something, the natural urge or what you believe the expectation is to fill it with more things, more outputs. And that whole piece of your thought process, which is, well, maybe this is a good thing.
Mhm.
What could or should I be doing with this time that's different from what I do with all the other time that I have? And you realizing, okay, this is a time I want to protect and that I can still be productive in my own way, in a different way, and get some of that rest where I'm not going at 100.
Yep.
I think is something that we all could think about a little bit more in terms of time management, but also like life design. Like, how do I
Yes.
do the things? And it doesn't always have to be the same. And there is a season where less is okay and
100%.
different is okay. So
And
I have
I,
to ask though, go ahead, please.
well, I was just going to drop in, you know, two things that I keep in mind. Um, one quote that I love, which is actually part of my coloring book. It says, "Nothing blooms all year round."
Hmm.
It's okay to take a step back for a moment. For me, I find it, you know, just beneficial to be able to step back and like reflect on everything versus go, 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 go. Because I will get caught up in that. I have been before. Um, and then the other one is like recognizing, you know, the verb of wintering.
Yeah.
Like everything has a season. Like we are supposed to take a break. It is natural to do that, and to do less and produce less, and just you. you get to a point where you accept that and you realize it's not a flaw that you have. It
Mhm.
actually, if anything, is a superpower. So just, it took me to lean into that.
That seasons piece is something that definitely resonates. So Monique had her point about, how we think about rest and what we collectively are talking about and feeling right now. But a good friend of mine, Amanda Miller Littlejohn, has talked about rest, has researched this, has kind of gone through it. And in its relationship to work, she had a series called Purposescaping. And it was all based on the seasons. And she talked about this winter period being the period like after the harvest. If you think about it from a farming kind of standpoint, and you're taking stock, okay, what did the year give me? What
Mm,
do I do differently in the year to come, in the seasons to come? Am I going to plant the same things? Am I
yeah.
going to do different things? And what do I want? What are my intentions for that? So I would encourage you definitely to check her thought process out, because she has a whole system around this work, and I think it's beautiful to hear you say it too. There's a seasonality to it, and it doesn't lead to less. It leads to better.
Yes.
If we can figure out how to think about our rest patterns and our work patterns in a way that leads to better, it'll all be good. But we've been spending a lot of time talking about this beautiful life you designed, and me from the outside, I'm like, this sounds great. I'm thinking about that myself, which is why I'm so interested in talking to you about it. As you've been doing all of this and you've kind of gotten to a good place now, how do you think your parents, your family members, how are they viewing all of this? Because I assume that this is probably very different from what they have seen people do in terms of how they set their life up. And I know the people in my family are probably would look at me like, huh? You're leaving this job to do what? This this consistent check for the check you're going to create. And not everybody will feel that way, but there's that kind of trope about that good government job. I don't work for the government, but that thought process of like, you don't leave certain things, you don't go do this. How did they respond, and how are they kind of responding now?
I love this part. Um, the context behind this is both of my parents have worked the same job, like up until that point where I was quitting my corporate job. Both my parents worked the same job almost 30 years.
Mm,
So 5 years, it's nothing. Remember?
you just get started.
It could be a long time or it could be a short time. Um, so that was the context. But my mom was actually the one who said, "Why haven't you left yet?"
uh, Now this is the same mom that was like, draw this, draw
Yes.
that.
Yes.
She saw it. She
Yes.
saw it.
Like she's like, what's holding you back? Like, truth be told, she wrote my resignation letter. I was scared. I
She's
was
like, I'm gonna help push you through this door.
I was terrified.
Oh
But
my gosh.
she wrote the letter because she was like, I know you need to get out of there. I don't know what you're gonna do, but I know you need to get out of there. And I was like, okay, well, thanks for your support. um, my dad, he was supportive. it it was kind of like he took the backseat approach where he was like, I'm gonna just see what she does. I'm
Mhm.
gonna watch. And then he would check in every now and then, check it, he'd be like, so how's the job search going? And I'd be like, Dad,
Not doing a job search.
there's no search. It's done. It's not happening. Um, but in that same, I just want to give people the understanding that, like, in the same breath as them being supportive, but maybe still being a little bit concerned, like, these were also, the people who have pushed me to be who I am, right? You talked earlier about, who was so influential in your journey. Like, my parents have so much to do with that. And it was really, as I was trying to decide, even from a younger age, like, well, do I want to try to go to art school for college or am I going to do something else? Like that decision to major in business marketing and international studies was not necessarily my first choice. That was a conversation, right?
That was a
We,
safer path. It was a
we
good
need
path.
to learn. We need to learn how to make money. Okay, but they knew that they raised somebody who was capable of figuring it out,
Hmm.
and so the support came um, right on time, and I laugh and I joke now because I have two younger brothers, and when they went to college, they majored in illustration and film and cinema. So
Wow. You paved the way. You had to go the hard road for them.
media and communications, I don't know what the titles are anymore, but like very clearly creative paths. Um, so yes, I had to be had to be the guinea pig. That's okay. It's okay. It's okay.
It worked out as it needed to work out.
It did. And, I don't regret anything. Like, my journey came all the way full circle. Like, everything that I do now for myself, or even for like how I pitch myself to clients, like, I learned all of that by doing PR first. You know
Hmm.
what I mean? So, like, it actually helped me be a more well rounded artist. And I think I needed every step of that journey to get me here. I don't know that I would be as successful as an artist as I am if I hadn't done that first.
And she is successful, y'all. I'm gonna put the website link in the chat. I have bought calendars. I have sent people gifts of artwork. Is legit, and that's just the stuff I can have in my house. I'm definitely gonna drop a few links so you can see some of the murals that are literally around the country with her work. I want to thank you so much for spending time with us, but I want us to focus in on maybe what that one quick point is on the practicality of rest. So if you could leave us with one quick point, what would it be?
My one quick point is that rest is productive. It really is. It really is.
It
It
just is.
just like you said, sometimes less leads to better. And that is where I am. And I need people to understand that it's part of the formula. You cannot leave it out and expect the best from yourself.
That is beautiful. And we will close with that. Thank you so much, Janelle.
Yes.